My name is Clayton Chapman. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to make an egg frittata. We're going to do that with a brown butter Hollandaise. And we're going to bake that frittata in a cast iron. So cast iron is one of my absolute favorite cooking vessels or mediums to cook in. It's incredibly versatile. Oftentimes it's misconstrued that you can't bake in cast iron. Now I have a cast iron that has been with me for a number of years that has great seasoning to it. It's also really well oiled, and so I'm not concerned at all about the egg sticking to it. And the cast iron can go to the table as well, so it becomes your cooking piece as well as your serving vessel. So we're going ahead and start the Hollandaise by browning some of our homemade butter. Our cast iron is nice and heated, medium-high heat. We're gonna drop this in. It's gonna immediately start to pop and fizzle as some of that water starts to cook out. Smells great. So because our butter is homemade, it still has some of that buttermilk left in it, so that needs to cook out first. So butter's first gonna melt, then cook out the buttermilk. Then it's gonna start to clarify a little bit, and then it'll start to brown. So what we're gonna do in the frittata is we're gonna kind of try and hit a lot of different depths of flavor. So we're gonna do caramelized onion, we're gonna do some roasted mushrooms, confit garlic, it's kind of like a roasted garlic, some fresh goat cheese, creme fraiche, some more oyster mushrooms, and then I have some pickled cherry tomatoes that we put up in the summer. We have some fresh spinach and fresh parsley that we're gonna add to it at the very end. It's past melted and it's like kind of in that like blonde butter stage, so we're getting close. Just another minute or so. You can definitely smell it. It smells like toasted nuts. You can see the color is past that blonde stage. And if you pick it up with a spoon, you can see how it's browning. Now this is when it gets tricky, is you can go from like delicious brown butter that's velvety and smooth to burnt butter or black butter really quickly. So the key is to get it out of the hot cast iron and into something else really fast. We're gonna go ahead and set this aside. Get started on our onion. So we'll go in half and then we'll top and tail. Throw it in the pan. We're just kind of gonna want to soften this a little bit. You can go ahead and add a little bit more whole butter just to get things moving. Use a lot of butter. No need to be shy with the butter. But see, I am a firm believer that if you are using quality ingredients, right, like somebody would say, hey man, that's a ton of butter. I am gonna argue that this came from delicious, sustainable, organic cream, and we made the butter ourselves, and I'm gonna eat it all day long. So this is an 8-inch cast iron. To one onion, we're gonna do about 12 eggs or so. The onions are starting to brown a little bit and get a little color. We're just gonna go ahead and add a splash of water because I don't actually wanna put too much color to them, but I want them to be nice and soft. So water's gonna release any kind of fond or anything that's delicious on the bottom of the pan. A couple tablespoons here of creme fraiche. And this is just gonna substitute the cream or the milk. Just give it a little bit more depth of flavor, more character. Healthy pinch of salt. Fresh cracked black pepper. So the key here is you want to put quite a bit of air into your eggs before we mix in the vegetables. And that's just going to kind of create this like light, fluffy, decadent frittata. If you don't whisk your eggs quite enough and really emulsify that creme fraiche into them, it's going to be kind of dense and you're not going to kind of have that like nice aerated baked egg at the end. So we're good to go for now. We'll set this aside. We're gonna go ahead and add a few cloves of roasted garlic or that garlic confit that we talked about. Now you could chop this, mince it, smash it. I like it whole. We're gonna add a sprig of thyme. Next we have some oyster mushrooms that are gonna go in. These are gonna put off a fair amount of water. That one we're gonna cut. We're gonna go ahead and salt again. And that salt's gonna pull out some of that moisture from the mushrooms. Just stir them in so they can hit the bottom of the pan, start to cook down. We also have some spinach that we're gonna fold in. You just wanna go ahead and pick the stem from the leaf here. Okay, mushrooms, onions, looking good. We've got our spinach set aside that we're gonna fold in. A few green onions or scallions to fold in as well. We're gonna add our greens at the very end so they stay nice and bright and they don't become kind of like dull and muted from the cooking process. And I have a few shiitake mushrooms here that I kind of pre-roasted that we'll just kind of fold in so you get that kind of mushroom medley. We're gonna take a little bit of flat leaf Italian parsley, pick some of these leaves off the stems, and I'm actually just gonna kind of leave the leaves whole. And these again are just gonna kind of add some nice brightness. The tomatoes are delicious, but the brine that they're in is actually delicious as well. I like to cook with a lot of acid. I'm gonna go ahead and add a few of these. It's gonna sizzle and pop. I'm actually gonna take a little bit of that pickling liquid, pour them in our eggs, because that's what's going to like separate your frittata from anybody else's. Because anybody can take vegetables and saute them down and mix them with eggs. So we're gonna go ahead and pull those thyme sprigs out. All right, onions are nice and caramely. Mushrooms are nice and caramelized. Tomatoes purge some of that vinegar out. Garlic's looking good. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna fold in all of our greens. And this is gonna be a pretty quick process. You can go ahead at this point. You can probably just turn off your heat and just let the residual heat from the cast iron do the rest of the work. You're almost letting like all that steam from the mushrooms and the onions and the tomatoes just kind of soften your greens a little bit. You really want it like the integrity of the greens to almost stay intact. So we're barely cooking them. A few folds here if you want, just to kind of tuck everything back down. You're like hitting all senses of the palate here. You've got the brightness from the greens and the parsley. You've got the depth from the mushrooms and the onions. You've got the acidity from the tomatoes. We're gonna take our veggies. We're gonna pour them into our eggs. So rather than going eggs in hot pan, we're gonna take hot veggies into cold eggs. This is gonna kind of temper the eggs so as they go back into a hot cast iron, they don't immediately start to cook. We're gonna season one more time with just a little bit of salt. We're gonna add a little more fresh pepper, a little bit of lemon zest. I use microplane for like almost everything, whether it be cheese or citrus or grating toasted nuts. I mean, there's so many different applications for it, but I absolutely love to take a little bit of fresh lemon, or whether it be grapefruit or orange or lime. It just kind of helps add some brightness, more flavor. So we'll fold that in. No need to clean out your cast iron or anything. We're gonna go right back into it. We want all that leftover grease that's still in there. Take our bowl, I'm gonna pour all this in. Oh my gosh, it's like I know what I'm doing. And then here I just have a little bit of fresh goat cheese. What this is gonna do, it's just gonna add like just some little pockets of fun here. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. I just kind of spread it throughout so that, you know, you get kind of a random bite here and there. I did not want to emulsify this into the batter itself because it would change the consistency of it altogether. We're gonna take our frittata, we're gonna put it in a 350-degree convection oven, meaning with the fan on. That's gonna take about 45 minutes. Brown butter hollandaise. Why? Because I can. We have about, let's say 12 ounces, so 3/4 a pound of brown butter. So one would say 3 eggs would probably be most appropriate. That yolk is what's going to keep all of that butter bound together. We're just separating the yolk from the white. Hollandaise is a little bit more forgiving. There are 3 yolks in that bowl. We're gonna add one more just for security measure. Egg whites you can set aside and save for any number of things. They're great in cocktails, like delicious, you know, whiskey sour with egg whites in it is awesome. So eggs, we're gonna whisk. This is where you're gonna have some fun. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. You can add some of this stuff in the beginning, you can add it in the end, but we are gonna start with a little bit of lemon zest. And the reason why I add the zest as well as a splash of acidity now is because the acidity in the vinegar and the acidity in the lemon zest is gonna help like coagulate the egg as it's cooking. Whisk everything together. As soon as our pot of water comes up, we're gonna go ahead and put that on as like a double boiler. Take a just kitchen towel, get it wet, corner to corner, fold it over itself. Then it makes like this little nest that your bowl can sit in as we're pouring in our butter for the Hollandaise. Damn. 25% in the cooking process, you can kind of see how all of our outside edges are starting to set and coagulate, but then the center is still totally raw. It's great, we're right on track. I like to add a little bit of parsley into my brown butter Hollandaise. If you had a different herb in the fridge, you can absolutely use it. Rock it. All right, so we've got our pot of water that's come up to just below a boil here, just below a simmer rather. So you can actually set the bowl right in the water if you want. You can set it right above. Well, I usually do like equal parts on the water, off the water, on the water, off the water. So let's say we go 10 seconds on. You're whisking the whole time. We call it figure eights, right? And an 8. It's just gonna help make sure that you're hitting all parts of the bowl. Okay, you're gonna pop it out of the water here. Just, you can see the heat coming off the eggs, so they go from being totally raw to being nice and frothy. This is like just before your ribbon stage. So we're gonna go back in. 6, 7, 8, 9. Good. Pull it off the heat. Part of making Hollandaise is not doing it too fast because you go from raw eggs to scrambled eggs. So this is what you call like your ribbon stage, where they're nice and velvety. Still smooth, there's no scramble in there, but the eggs are starting to cook, nice and thick. Yeah. So, good way to know if your eggs are done cooking is you drag your whisk or whatever utensil through it. If the eggs hold their own on the side of the bowl, you're done. You can start adding your fat. Mine are not quite there, but my bowl is still hot and it might carry them over. So I like to make sure that we're getting everything on the outside of the bowl here. If you start to get the crusties on the outside, leave it. Don't scrape them back in. Drag your finger through it. The eggs are kind of holding their own shape there. So we're gonna add in that brown butter that we made earlier. You want this to be warm. You don't want it to be like scalding, boiling hot like it was when it came out of the pan, or it's gonna scramble your eggs. You don't want it totally cold either. Okay, eggs are set. We just kind of tempered our brown butter a little bit in the water so it's still nice and warm. We're just gonna kind of go in a nice steady stream. At least when you start, you want to go in like a little bit at a time so that you're allowing yourself the ability to emulsify the butter into your eggs. Then after you get a little bit in there and a little bit started, then you can pour a little bit more heavy-handed. That brown butter is going to take this from like that bright yellow to like a golden brown. Homemade Hollandaise, not for the faint-hearted. Almost done here. See, now we can start to add a little bit more heavy-handed. Tis thick, that's good. We're gonna thin this out with just a little splash of hot water at the very end. Okay. So it's almost like pudding at this point, and that's okay. That means we've got like a really nice tight emulsification. Add just the last bit of butter before we get into like milk solids there. Okay, we're just gonna give this a quick flash of heat so it stays warm for us. That roasted garlic, we're just gonna add a splash of that oil in there for flavor. A little bit more pickling liquid, pinch of salt, parsley. And hit it with a little lemon juice. Somebody once taught me a cool trick. If you actually squeeze with the cut side up, the seeds don't fall in. Just kind of thinned it out, so now it's like a nice sauce consistency. I am that guy that I'll just eat this stuff by the spoonful. It's awesome. A little more salt. At this point, you just want to hold this warm until the frittata comes out of the oven. If you have like a deli cup or a container or something like that in the house, you can transfer your Hollandaise to that. And then we're just gonna kind of let it sit and hang out in that water for a bit. Check our frittata. Oh my goodness. I'll go ahead and pull that out. Yes. All right. One of my favorite kitchen tools and one of the most simple. So it's a simple cake tester. We use it to cook meat with, which we'll show you in another episode, but you can just kind of check to make sure that this is cooked all the way through. So you'll push it in, you'll pull it, you'll just want to see if there's like any egg left on the cake tester. If not, which it doesn't look like there is, and it's like ripping hot all the way through, your eggs are done. Just kind of gently cut through it there. Pull this baby out. First piece is always the hardest. All these nice air pockets of the eggs are just like light and fluffy. Still nice and warm. I'm just gonna serve this Hollandaise on the side here. How about we put some on top? What do you think of that? Yeah? There we go. Take that to the table. So good. So much depth of flavor. Roasted mushrooms, caramelized onions, acidity from the lemon and the tomatoes, the nuttiness from the brown butter. It's just like, it is so delicious. Delicious enough that I'm gonna eat another bite. So this is kind of my go-to on a Sunday morning, Saturday morning, or, I mean, I guess really any time. I feel like this is like it's like a fail-proof frittata. You can utilize whatever you have in your fridge, whatever you have in your pantry. Everything is in one pot. Your friends and family will love you for it. Thanks for being here today, guys. We'll see you next time. Hit subscribe below and join us each week as we share new recipes that I love to make at home. It's gonna be fun, so come along. We're almost there.